Today's topic is about sales and leaseback. For some of our audience who are not very familiar with the terms, could you give a quick introduction about what sales and leaseback mean?
In general, for sales and leaseback deal, the asset owner will sell the asset, either like a factory or a warehouse, to a buyer or a developer like BW, and at the same time they're gonna sign a long-term lease agreement with us in order to lease back the facility for say like a 5 or 10 years lease term in order to ensure the operation stability. Actually, if you go see in other more developed market like in US or Europe, you will see that there are a lot more of similar transaction. Because in that market, companies, they actually care more about like capital efficiency. And they would like to adopt the asset-light model instead of having to actually physically own the assets. But like in Vietnam, like I think most of the company, they are still kind of bounded by the Asian concept, like you have to own the land, you have to own the facilities in order to ensure the stability, right? So there have not been many transactions in Vietnam yet. I can name a few transactions. For example, like Marble Tree, they acquired the warehouse from Unilever in 2018. Or for us, BW, we acquired a warehouse from German Depth Logistics in 2020.
It seems like the warehouse model is more popular than factory when it comes to sales and leaseback. Why is it more popular for warehouse?
The answer is more on the general specifications of between the warehouse and the factories. So you'll see that the warehouse is just where the company, they just store their goods, their products there, right? So normally in general, the warehouse specifications are quite standardized and one tenant can use, and if they move out, we can easily find another tenant. So the specifications of the factories, I can say they are quite different for each other. So it doesn't mean that if your company can work in that factory, my company can also do. So when we do the technical due diligence, we obviously have to see whether the design, the specifications are kind of somehow standards enough for us. So in the worst case that that the existing tenant walk away, then we can find another tenant. And to see is it doable, how much more capital expenditure we have to spend in to kind of repair and do the maintenance or to do some rectifications. So we'll have to take into account all those factors.
So Ms. Tu, what is the key factor that a company needs to take into account when they are dealing with a sales and leaseback transaction?
So there are, I think there are three main factors that we will have to consider. The first factor is about the facility specifications and the quality of the buildings, the structure. So because for us, right, because we like a buyer, of course, we would love to the tenant to stay with us forever so we can have the rent. But we have to bear in mind that we have to be prepared for a worst case, right? Say like 5 years, 10 years, they walk away. We should be able to lease the facility to other tenants. Like we have, we call it like preliminary due diligence. We have the technical due diligence before we decide to go ahead with the deal, right? So we have to send the technical team there to check first on the design, the specifications, the structure, the conditions of the facilities, the warehouse or the factories, to see whether they were well designed, well built, or well maintained. In order to kind of continue to be used for the next, 20 or 30 years. So that is very important for us. The second factor we'll consider, of course, is about the price, right? But, in a sales and leaseback, as we say that, one side, the seller is going to sell the asset for a price. Of course, they want the highest price as possible. And then later on, they would like to lease the facility as low, the lowest possible rent as possible, right? We obviously have a required rate of return internally. So in order to do a deal, we have to meet a certain returns. So the two sides, I think at that time will have to have together work on a win-win basis in order to make the deal successful. And I think the last factors that we will have to consider is about the ownership structure and the deal structure. So just to give you an example, like in Vietnam, the foreign buyers cannot acquire the asset directly. So they have to basically buy shares in the company, what we call is like a project company which owns the asset, right? But then, as a buyer, you will also have to consider about the capital, the cash flow, the tax, development risk, the licensing, the pink book and everything. There's many factors we have to consider will do the sales and leaseback structure.
So let's talk about timing. Is there any standard timing for a sales and leaseback, or it actually varies case by case?
It's really difficult and there's no definite answer. From my experience, for sales and leaseback deal, it would normally take 6 or 12 months from the initial discussion to the deal closing. It's quite a long process. Yeah.
Well, your answer has wrapped up the session pretty well.
Thank you so much.
Have a good time.
Thank you.